I forgot to tell my daughter that the technician had fixed the apartment's security camera yesterday. I decided to test if it was working and pulled it up on my phone. I was in shock when I saw what my son-in-law was doing to my granddaughter. But just 10 minutes later, I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to see how far it's reached. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a now cold cup of coffee and a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. The home security camera system had been acting up lately, the signal cutting in and out, and it made me uneasy. I always want to make sure everything in the house is safe. So I called the technician. He was a young guy with a friendly smile who showed up even earlier than we'd agreed. He spent a little while checking the recorder, adjusted the Wi-Fi modem, and then turned to me smiling. "All set, ma'am. The signal is stable now. You just need to open the app on your phone, and you can see everything anytime." I nodded, thanked him, and walked him to the door, feeling a little more relieved. Later that afternoon, I went to pick up Lucy, my little granddaughter, from school. She's 8 years old, with big round eyes and a smile as bright as the sun that always warms my heart. Lucy took my hand, and as we walked, she'd usually tell me all about her day at school in her little voice that was as clear as a bell. But that day, I noticed she was quieter than usual. She only answered me in short sentences, and then walked in silence, glancing down every now and then at her little white sneakers, which were starting to look a bit yellowed. I told myself she was probably just tired or had a bad day at school. Just as we got to the house, Rick, my daughter Amy's boyfriend, was also walking in. He had moved in with us just a few months ago, even though he and my daughter weren't married yet. Rick always presented himself with a flawless appearance, a kind smile, and little gifts. Today, he brought a box of butter cookies that smelled delicious, exactly the kind Lucy loves. He knelt down and said to her in a voice as sweet as honey, "For my little princess." Lucy gave a small smile and took the box, but I noticed she didn't open it right away like she always did. Instead, she hugged it to her chest, thanked him quietly, and went to sit silently in a corner of the dining table. Dinner went on as usual. Amy was busy in the kitchen and yelled for Lucy and me to set the table. Rick told a couple of jokes, trying to lighten the mood, but I noticed Lucy just ate with her head down, never looking up. I asked her, "Honey, did anything fun happen at school today?" She just shook her head, and her fork paused over her plate of rice. Amy frowned and said in a slightly harsh tone, "There she goes again, Mom. Don't spoil her so much." I stayed quiet, feeling a pang of sadness, but I didn't want to make things more tense. After dinner, I felt tired, probably just my age, so I excused myself to go to my room and rest. In the middle of the night, I woke up with a start, my throat parched. The room was completely dark, with only the street light peeking through the crack in the curtains, painting faint smudges on the ceiling. I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand, but accidentally bumped my old cell phone. Out of one of those habits you pick up when you get older, I opened the camera app just to check that everything in the house was okay. The screen lit up, showing the usual living room, the sofa with its worn fabric, the wooden coffee table, and the vase of dried flowers I'd put in the corner. No one was there. I was about to turn it off when suddenly a shadow entered the frame. It was Rick. He was pulling Lucy by the hand. I felt my heart stop. Lucy, my little granddaughter, was standing there frozen, her little hands clutching the hem of her pajamas, her feet seemingly nailed to the floor. Rick sat on the sofa, patted the space next to him, and in a deep voice that carried an invisible weight, he said, "Come on, sit here with me." I could clearly see the hesitation in Lucy's every move. She stood there for a moment, then slowly walked over and sat on the very edge of the couch, as far away from him as she could get. Her gaze was fixed on the floor. She didn't dare to look up. Rick cracked a smile, but that smile sent a shiver down my spine. He pulled out a comic book and handed it to Lucy. As she took it, he deliberately leaned forward, draping his arm behind her back. That gesture, though small, made my blood run cold. It didn't seem like the affection of an uncle, but something unnecessary, calculated. Lucy shifted slightly to move away, but Rick suddenly pulled her toward him. He leaned close to her ear and whispered something. I couldn't hear what it was, but Lucy's face instantly turned as pale as a sheet of paper, and her eyes flew wide open, filled with terror. I felt like someone was squeezing my heart. I couldn't breathe, as if the air had suddenly turned thick. I wanted to scream, to run out of my room, but my body was frozen solid. On the screen, Lucy tried to stand up as if she wanted to escape, but Rick grabbed her arm tightly, yanking her so hard she fell into his lap. It was a rough, violent gesture that made Lucy flinch, and her little shoulders began to tremble. He said something else to her, but his voice was too low for the camera to pick up. Suddenly he glanced toward the camera, which made me jump and sent my heart racing in my chest. But then he looked away, as if he didn't know the camera was working. It hit me then. I hadn't told anyone they'd fixed the cameras. No one in the house, not Amy or Rick, knew it was recording everything. I quickly turned off the phone, clutching my chest. My breath caught in my throat. A mix of fear, anger, and helplessness washed over me like a storm tearing through my mind. Only one thought echoed in my head. I just saw something no grandmother in the world would ever dare to imagine. I lay back down, but even though I squeezed my eyes shut, I couldn't sleep. The image of Lucy's pale face and her trembling hands clutching her pajamas wouldn't stop tormenting me. I kept asking myself, what is happening in this house? Rick, the man I thought was decent, the one Amy loved, was he really the person I thought he was? And Lucy, my sweet little granddaughter, what was she enduring? I clutched the blanket, my heart in pieces. As her grandmother, I had promised myself I would protect her with my life. But now I felt powerless, like I was facing a monster without knowing how to fight it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, but couldn't chase away the chill that gripped my heart. I stood in our familiar kitchen, trying to make a delicious breakfast to drive away the anxiety gnawing at me. I made some oatmeal with a comforting toasty smell and hot chocolate, just how Lucy always liked it. I was hoping the warm smells would make her smile again, even just a little. I called Lucy to come for breakfast. She walked in with sunken eyes, as if the weight of the world was on her little shoulders. She sat down, picked up a spoon, and stirred the oatmeal a couple of times. But then she let it drop and said quietly, I don't want any more. Grandma, her voice was so small, like a trapped whisper. I looked into her eyes and saw a sadness so deep I'd never seen it in an 8-year-old before. My heart ached, but I tried to keep my voice gentle. Just a little more, sweetie. I made this oatmeal especially for you. Amy, my daughter, came out of her room, her hair still messy and her purse in her hand. Seeing Lucy not touching her bowl, she frowned and said sharply, It's the same drama every day. All you do is make me mad. I wanted to say something to calm things down, but before I could speak, Rick appeared. He stood in the kitchen doorway with that same smile, the one that now gave me the creeps. He walked over and said in his honey-sweet voice, Now, honey, don't scold her. Let me talk her into it. He placed his hand gently on Lucy's shoulder. It was just a light touch, but I saw clear as day how my granddaughter's little shoulders flinched, as if she'd been zapped by electricity. Her whole body tensed up, and her hands gripped the edge of the table like she wanted to run. I looked over at Amy, hoping she would notice how strange that was. But my daughter just glanced at Lucy and kept putting things in her purse, getting ready for work. She paid no attention to the girl's reaction, as if it were completely normal. I wanted to scream, to say that something was very, very wrong, but I had a lump in my throat and couldn't get a single word out. In silence, Lucy ate a few more spoonfuls of oatmeal, but her movements were slow, as if she was only doing it to get it over with. Then she stood up, grabbed her backpack tightly, and ran out the door without another word. I watched her go, that tiny little back, and felt my heart shatter. I knew something was happening, but I still didn't have the courage to face the terrible truth I had seen the night before. On the way to school, Lucy walked with her head down, her eyes glued to her scuffed-up white sneakers. I tried to make conversation, asking her about her homework, her teacher, anything to pull her out of her silence. "What did you learn today?" "Tell Grandma," I asked gently. But Lucy just kept shaking her head, her lips pressed tightly together. I stopped, put my hand on her shoulder, and said softly, "Sweetie, if something is making you sad, you can tell me, okay? Grandma will always be here for you." She looked up, a hint of doubt in her eyes, but then she shook her head again and said in a tiny voice, "It's nothing, Grandma." But the way she avoided my gaze left my heart in a knot. After school, I was waiting for her at the gate. Lucy came out and gave me a weak smile when she saw me, but it wasn't enough to hide the exhaustion on her little face. On the way back, she started talking, telling me about a drawing she made in art class and about her friend Sophie, who had shared a new colored pencil with her. I listened, trying to cherish this rare moment when she opened up a little. But as soon as we opened the front door and she saw Rick's silhouette on the living room sofa, Lucy stopped in her tracks. She stood there, completely still, clutching the straps of her backpack, her gaze lost somewhere else. Rick looked up and smiled with that fake charm of his. "Is the princess home already? Come here, look what your Uncle Rick brought you today." He held up a chocolate bar, the kind that used to make Lucy squeal with excitement. But this time, she just said quietly, "I don't like candy," and ran straight to her room, slamming the door behind her. The sound of the door echoed like a knife in my heart. Rick shrugged and chuckled dismissively. "Guess she's hitting her teenage years early. What an attitude." He said it like a joke, but his eyes were cold as ice, as if he was studying me. I didn't answer him. I just walked silently to the kitchen, but inside, a storm was about to break. I started paying attention to every little detail. The next few days, I tried to watch Lucy more closely. That night, when I went into her room to pick up the dirty laundry, I found her sitting in a corner, hugging her knees in complete darkness without a light on. She was clutching her old teddy bear, the one she'd always kept with her since they took her dad, Anthony, away. I went over and asked softly, "What's wrong, sweetie? Why don't you turn on the light?" Lucy looked up, her eyes red, but she quickly shook her head. "It's nothing, Grandma." I caught a glimpse of her pulling down the sleeve of her pajamas, covering her wrist. A bad feeling washed over me, but I didn't dare look closer, afraid I wouldn't be able to handle what I thought I might see. I sat down next to her, placed my hand on her head, and stroked her soft hair. "You know how much your grandma loves you, right? If something is scaring you, you can tell me. I'll protect you." Lucy nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the floor, as if she were keeping a secret too big to tell. I left the room, my soul feeling as heavy as stone. I knew she was scared, and I knew who was scaring her. The following nights, I started paying more attention. Lucy wasn't sleeping well. She would wake up startled in the middle of the night. One time I heard whimpering from her room. "No. No, please." Her voice was trembling like she was begging in a nightmare. I ran in, turned on the light, and found her curled up in a ball, drenched in sweat. I hugged her tight and whispered, "It's okay, sweetie. Grandma's here." But Lucy just hugged me back without saying a word, her little body trembling in my arms. Every time Rick came near her, I could clearly see the panic in Lucy's eyes. When he brought her a glass of juice, she would just hold it without drinking, her hands shaking. When he patted her on the shoulder, she would flinch, as if the slightest touch hurt her. But in front of everyone else, Rick was always the perfect man. He laughed, he chatted, he helped me carry the groceries, he fixed the broken pipe, and he even bought Lucy new notebooks. Amy looked at him with admiration, as if he were the hero of her life, but I could see behind that mask. I saw the way he looked at Lucy when he thought no one was watching, a look that now sent chills down my spine. In the afternoon, I sat by the window. The soft, golden sunlight streamed through the glass, reflecting on Lucy's worn sweater that I was carefully mending. My heart felt heavy, as if the happy days of my family were buried under layers of dust. Every stitch the needle made in the fabric felt like a cut in my own heart, dragging me back to the days when Lucy's laughter was the most beautiful music in this house. I remember the years when Amy, my daughter, was young, when she shone like the sun. Amy had a happy marriage with Anthony, her ex-husband, whom I always loved like a son. Anthony was a civil engineer, a good man of few words, but with a heart as big as the sky. Every afternoon when he came home from work, he would lift Lucy into his arms, sit her on his shoulders, and they would both laugh their heads off on the way to the park on the corner. "Grandma, I want strawberry ice cream," Lucy would shout in her crystal clear voice, and Anthony would wink at me, pretending to complain. "This kid! Strawberry ice cream every day. I think I'm going to have to plant a whole field of strawberries for you." I would watch them from the porch, holding hands, and my heart would feel so warm, as if I were wrapped in the comfort of my home. Dinners were the moments I cherished the most. Anthony was always thoughtful, pouring me a glass of water and asking in his deep, warm voice, "How are you doing? Not too tired today?" Amy would chatter about her job, from the new co-worker who talked bad about the boss, to the projects that had her excited. Lucy, who was maybe 3 or 4 at the time, would sit in her high chair, kicking her little feet, and would burst out laughing every time Anthony made her giggle. Her laugh was like a wind chime, echoing through the house, making all my tiredness melt away. I used to tell myself, as long as my family is always like this, I don't need anything else. But one fateful day, it all shattered like a broken dream. I remember that afternoon perfectly. When the front door burst open, 3 police officers came in, their faces cold, and read an arrest warrant for Anthony for a corruption charge on a major construction project. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. Amy screamed, her voice torn. "No, you're mistaken. My husband didn't do anything wrong." Lucy, who was barely 5, clung to my skirt, and with her confused little eyes she asked me, "Grandma, where's my daddy going? Why are they taking him?" I hugged her tightly, trying to make my voice sound calm, but inside, a fire was burning me up. "Your daddy is just going on a business trip, sweetie. He'll be back soon." I lied, just so she wouldn't be scared, but I didn't even know myself if Anthony would ever come back. From that day on, the laughter vanished from our house. Amy changed completely. She became irritable, bitter, as if all the misery in the world was Lucy's fault. I remember one night when Lucy spilled a glass of orange juice, and Amy screamed at her, "It's always you. If it weren't for you, my life wouldn't be this miserable. You're the burden dragging me down." Lucy stood frozen, her eyes filled with tears, and it broke my soul. I pulled her to me, trying to comfort her, but Amy's words were like knives stabbing my heart. I wanted to say something to defend Lucy, but every time I opened my mouth, Amy would shut me down. "Stay out of it, Mom. You don't understand anything." I felt helpless. All I could do was hold my granddaughter and whisper, "I'm here, don't be scared." Time passed and Amy withdrew even more, focusing only on her work and a pain she never shared with me. I tried to be the pillar for them both, but every day I felt more like a shadow in my own home. Until one day, Amy came home with a radiant smile I hadn't seen in a long time. She was holding a man's hand, and she introduced him to me with a voice full of pride. "Mom, this is Rick. He's a really good man, and he's going to help me rebuild my life." I looked at Rick, a tall man with a kind smile and a sharp gaze. He called me Carol in a respectful voice and brought a fruit basket as a gift. I smiled back, thinking that maybe this was a ray of hope for my family. Soon after, Amy let Rick move into the house, though there was no wedding. I didn't object. I just hoped Amy would find happiness after so many years of suffering. Rick seemed like the perfect man. He helped me with the groceries, fixed the broken pipe in the kitchen, and even painted the living room wall that was starting to peel. With Lucy, he played the part of a devoted uncle. He bought her new school supplies, sometimes picked her up from school, and always defended her when Amy scolded her. "Come on, honey. She's just a kid. Don't be so hard on her," he would say in a soft voice, making Amy smile and hug him. I even started to think we were lucky to have someone like Rick in the house, someone who brought back the stability we had lost. But sometimes, I'd witness moments that left a thorn in my heart. One time, while Lucy was doing her homework at the dining table, Rick stood behind her, watching her for longer than necessary. That look wasn't one of a concerned uncle. It was something else I couldn't describe, like a dark shadow lurking. I'd tell myself, "You're just getting old and seeing things that aren't there." I tried to ignore it, but that feeling of unease grew, especially after what I saw on the camera last night. Those images were like a stab to the heart, making me realize I wasn't imagining anything. Rick, the man the whole neighborhood praised, was hiding a demon under his perfect mask. That night, the kitchen smelled of the steak Amy was cooking. The sound of the knife chopping vegetables, mixed with the sizzle of the meat in the skillet, seemed like an attempt to drown out the tension squeezing my heart. I stood by the kitchen doorway, clutching an old dish towel, gathering all the courage I had to say what I knew would shake my family to its core. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I couldn't let Lucy, my little granddaughter, continue living in fear. I took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and with a trembling but firm voice, I said, "Amy, I need to talk to you. I've seen the way Rick is with Lucy, and it's not right." As soon as the words were out, it felt like the entire room fell silent. The chopping stopped. Amy whipped around, her eyes blazing like two flames, shooting me a furious look I'd never seen from her before. "Here we go again, Mom," she snapped, her voice as sharp as a razor. "You're always imagining things. I bet the kid is making up stories for attention. She doesn't like that I have someone new, can't you see that?" A bitter taste filled my throat, like I'd swallowed a poison pill. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her I wasn't imagining anything, that I had seen Rick's actions with my own eyes on the camera. My trembling hand went into my apron pocket, about to pull out my phone to show her the horrible video. But just then the door opened. Rick walked in, carrying a grocery bag, his face beaming with that same smile that now sent shivers down my spine. He put the bag on the table, looked at Amy and me, and asked with fake concern, "What's wrong, my loves? Why the long faces?" Amy didn't even let me speak. She turned to Rick, her voice filled with an anger as if I had offended her. "My mom is saying things about you again. She says you're not acting right with Lucy. It's ridiculous." I stood there paralyzed, feeling the floor open up beneath me. Amy's words were like a stab, not just to my heart, but they made me realize she had completely sided with Rick against her own mother. Rick looked at me, his eyes wide, putting on a perfect act. "Carol, do you really think I'd be capable of something like that?" he said, his voice trembling as if he were deeply hurt. "I've always seen Lucy as my own daughter. Don't you see how I've tried to take care of this family?" He paused, pretending to choke up, and wiped his eyes as if holding back tears. "I don't understand why you distrust me like this, Carol." The way he said my name with that respectful tone now just made me sick. Amy immediately went to him, wrapped her arms around him, and comforted him. "Don't listen to her, honey. My mom's getting old. She imagines things. I believe you. I know you'd never do anything like that." Her smile was tender, her gaze toward the Rick full of love, as if he were her entire world. I was speechless. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was defending a monster and pushing me aside. I wanted to scream, to shake Amy and tell her she was blind, that she was putting her own daughter in danger, but I couldn't. The words got stuck in my throat, and I just stood there, helpless, watching as Rick, over Amy's shoulder, gave me an almost imperceptible smile. It was the smile of a winner, a smile that froze my blood. I turned around in silence and walked to my room, my feet as heavy as if I were dragging chains. Helplessness washed over me like a giant wave, pulling me under. I closed my bedroom door, collapsed onto the bed, and buried my face in my hands. I raised Amy. I loved her. I sacrificed my whole life so she could have something better. And now she saw me as an enemy, a paranoid old woman trying to ruin her happiness. I wondered what made Amy change so much. Did the pain from what happened to Anthony harden her heart? Or did Rick manipulate her so skillfully that he turned her into a stranger to her own mother? That night, dinner was a silent hill. Amy deliberately ignored me, chatting animatedly only with Rick. "What do you think of this dish, honey? A co-worker taught me how to make it," she'd say, smiling, with a joy that seemed oblivious to everything else. Rick would nod, praising her. It's delicious, babe. You're an amazing cook. He turned to me with a fake smile. What did you think, Carol? I just nodded without answering, because I knew if I opened my mouth, I wouldn't be able to hold back the words welling up inside me. Lucy sat next to me, stiff as a statue, eating with her head down, not daring to look at anyone. Her little hands gripped her silverware as if she were trying to hold something in. After dinner, I saw Rick pull a bouquet of red roses from his bag and hand them to Amy with a syrupy voice. For you, because you always make me happy. Amy beamed, hugging him, her eyes shining with joy. Thank you, honey, they're beautiful, she exclaimed, then turned to me with a hint of reproach in her voice. See, Mom, Rick is always so thoughtful. I didn't reply. I just got up silently to clear the plates, my heart in pieces. Meanwhile, Lucy got up without a sound, slipped away to her room, and closed the door without a word. I went after her, intending to comfort her. But when I reached her door, I heard a soft sob from inside. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to go in. Lucy's crying was like a knife in my heart. Every sob was a reminder that I was failing to protect her. I stood there for a long time in the dark hallway, feeling more alone than ever. The next morning, I was in the yard, sweeping the dry leaves that covered the path. The morning sunlight hit my face, but it couldn't warm the chill that gripped my heart. I was still haunted by last night's conversation with Amy, Rick's triumphant smirk, and Lucy's muffled cries from behind her bedroom door. I swept the leaves, trying to focus on each movement of the broom, but my mind kept replaying the image of my granddaughter trembling, curled up in the dark corner of her room. Suddenly, the sound of the phone snapped me out of my thoughts. I jumped and pulled the old cell phone from my apron pocket. It was Miss Davis, Lucy's teacher. Her voice on the other end of the line sounded urgent, not like the other times she'd called with a routine question. Carol, could you please come to the school right away? It's something important about Lucy. My heart started pounding, as if someone was squeezing it. I didn't ask any more questions. I just quickly replied, I'm on my way, and hung up. With trembling hands, I locked the door, grabbed my old sweater hanging in the corner, and rushed out onto the street. The whole way to the school, I couldn't stop thinking about Lucy. What could have happened? Did she get in trouble in class? Or a horrible thought crossed my mind, making me tremble. Could it have something to do with Rick? When I got to the school gate, Miss Davis was already waiting for me. Her face was etched with worry, and her eyes showed a clear tension. She didn't say much, just motioned for me to follow her into an empty teacher's lounge. The air in the room was heavy, as if it were hiding a terrible secret. Lucy was sitting there on a small wooden chair, clutching her backpack to her chest like it was her only shield. Next to her was Sophie, her best friend, whose little hand was holding Lucy's tightly. Not letting go, when she saw me, Lucy looked up, but her eyes were empty, and she pressed her lips together, trying not to look at me directly. I could feel the fear radiating from her small body, and my heart felt like it was splitting in two. Miss Davis slid a drawing notebook towards me and said in a serious voice, Carol, I think you should see this. I took the notebook and, with shaking hands, opened it. On the page was a drawing that took my breath away. It was a tall, deformed figure, like a monster with glowing red eyes, its long arms reaching out toward a tiny girl huddled in a dark corner. The strokes were rough, filled with dark colors, as if drawn in a fit of desperation. I turned to the next pages, and my heart sank deeper with each one. They were all similar images: the monster with red eyes, the little girl with a terrified face, and darkness covering the entire page. I looked up at Miss Davis, trying to keep my voice from shaking. What is this, ma'am? The teacher lowered her voice, as if afraid of hurting someone else. I asked Lucy who it was. She told me, It's my mom's boyfriend. Those words were like a direct stab to my heart. My head spun. Everything around me went blurry. Rick, he was the monster in Lucy's drawings. I turned to look at my granddaughter, but she just lowered her head, her lips pressed tight, as if holding back a secret too big to share. Sophie, Lucy's little friend, spoke up timidly. her voice small but full of concern. "Ma'am, one time Lucy told me she was really scared to go home. She said that every time that man looked at her, she got a really bad feeling. And she also told me that sometimes he calls her into his room when her mom isn't there." Sophie's words hit me like a thunderclap. I felt the blood drain from my face, and my breath caught in my chest. I pulled a chair over to Lucy, knelt in front of her, hugged her tightly, and said in a shaky voice, "Sweetie, whatever it is, tell Grandma. I'm here, I'll protect you." Lucy shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. But then she leaned close to my ear and whispered a sentence that shattered my soul. "Grandma, take me anywhere. Just don't make me go back to that house. I'm so scared." Her voice was tiny, trembling like a final plea. I hugged her even tighter, feeling her little body shake in my arms, her muffled sobs like knives in my heart. I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, but I knew I had to be strong. For Lucy, I couldn't afford to be weak. Miss Davis looked at me with a gaze full of compassion but also urgency. "Carol, I've been watching Lucy for the past few weeks. She's not the same. She barely talks, she doesn't smile, and these drawings, they show she's terrified. As her teacher, I can only inform the family, but you need to do something immediately." I nodded, saying nothing more. I knew she was right. I had waited too long, had hoped it was all a misunderstanding, but now Lucy's drawings and her plea were the clearest proof. I lifted Lucy into my arms, held her tight, and walked out of the room. She buried her face in my shoulder, her small body racked with choked sobs. "Grandma, I don't want to go home," Lucy whispered, her voice so faint it almost disappeared. I squeezed her tighter and whispered back, "I'm not going to let you be scared ever again, sweetie. I promise." Suddenly I remembered Dr. Stephen Morris, a psychologist who had been a good friend of my husband's when he was alive. Stephen was a good man, always willing to listen and understand, and I knew he was the only one who could help me better understand what was happening to Lucy. I picked up the phone and, with trembling hands, dialed his number. When his voice came on the line, I nearly choked. "Stephen, I need to see you. It's about Lucy, my granddaughter. It's something very serious." He agreed to see me that same day, telling me to come to his private practice downtown. "Bring her here, Carol," he said, his voice deep but full of concern. "I'll do everything I can." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and hung up, feeling as if I'd found a ray of hope in the storm that was drowning me. I looked at Lucy, still cuddled up in my arms, her little hand clinging to my blouse, as if she were afraid that if she let go, the wind would carry her away. "Grandma, I'm so tired," she whispered weakly. I stroked her hair, trying to make my voice as sweet as possible. "Rest for a little while, sweetie. I'm going to take you somewhere safe." In the afternoon, I took Lucy by the hand to Dr. Stephen's office. The place was bright and warm, with fun kids' drawings on the walls, flying elephants, smiling fish, and colorful houses. But that cheerful atmosphere couldn't dispel the fear in my heart. Lucy squeezed my hand tightly, her steps slow, as if each one took a great effort. I gently squeezed her hand back and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetie. Dr. Stephen is Grandma's friend. He's very nice." Dr. Stephen came out, his hair now gray but with the same kind smile as always. He shook my hand firmly, his eyes full of compassion, and then he sat down in front of Lucy, getting down to her level. "Hi, Lucy," he said, his voice as warm as a grandfather's. "Don't you worry, okay? No one here is going to make you say anything. Do you want to draw a picture? You can draw whatever you want." Lucy stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands still clutching the teddy bear I brought for her, a gift from Anthony, the one thing she always kept by her side. Stephen placed a box of crayons and a blank sheet of paper in front of her, then leaned back, watching quietly. At first, Lucy didn't touch the crayons. She just sat there, her gaze distant, as if she were in a world I couldn't reach. I sat beside her, my heart in pieces, wanting to hug her but not daring to interrupt. Then, as if driven by an emotion she couldn't contain, Lucy's trembling little hand reached for the black crayon. The first strokes appeared slow and hesitant. Little by little, A giant silhouette formed on the paper. A tall, deformed figure with 2 sharp horns on its head and arms stretched out like a cage, trapping a tiny girl. The girl in the drawing was huddled, her big round eyes full of panic, her arms wrapped around herself as if she wanted to disappear. I looked at the drawing, a sharp pain in my chest. The image was too similar to the ones I'd seen in her school notebook, but this time, Lucy's fears seemed drawn with more clarity, more force, like a silent scream. Dr. Stephen just nodded silently, his gaze fixed on every stroke in no rush at all. When Lucy put the crayon down, she turned to hug her teddy bear, burying her face in it as if she wanted to escape the world. Stephen asked gently, "Who is that, Lucy? Do you want to tell me?" But the little girl just shook her head, her tear-filled eyes looking at me with a pleading gaze, as if asking me to save her from this nightmare. After the session, Stephen took me into the hallway, closing the door so Lucy wouldn't hear. His face turned serious, and his voice became grave. "Carol, the child is showing signs of very severe psychological trauma. These drawings, along with her withdrawn behavior, indicate that fear has taken deep root in her mind. The risk of depression is very high, and if we don't intervene in time, the consequences could be much worse." I nodded, clutching my purse strap, feeling like my whole world was collapsing. He continued, urgency in his voice. "Here is my advice. Under no circumstances should you leave Lucy alone with that man. You need to get her out of that environment immediately. Do you have any proof to confirm this?" Shaking, I told him what I saw on the camera, Rick's gestures, Lucy's terrified look, and the drawings from school. Stephen listened, nodding, and then put a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Carol, but you need to act fast. I'm going to write up an official report on Lucy's condition, but you must take her to a safe place and report this to the authorities." I nodded, a lump in my throat. I knew he was right, but the thought of confronting Rick, of convincing Amy, and possibly taking this to court terrified me. But for Lucy, there was no turning back. As we left the office, Lucy didn't let go of my hand. Her little hand was ice cold. She whispered in a faint voice, "Grandma, please don't make me go back to that house." Those words were like a dagger in my heart. I stopped, knelt in front of her, and hugged her with all my might. "I promise, sweetie," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you ever again. I'm taking you somewhere safe." Lucy buried her face in my shoulder, her soft sobs making me want to cry with her. But I held back, wiped my tears, stood up, and taking her hand, we left. My heart was heavy, but it was filled with determination. I made a promise to myself. From this moment on, I would be the last wall protecting Lucy, even if it meant facing the whole world, including my own daughter. I knew the road ahead would be full of thorns, but for my granddaughter, I was ready for anything. After the visit with Dr. Stephen, I felt as if the world was crumbling at my feet. His words about Lucy's psychological state, about the fear so deeply rooted in her soul, were like an alarm bell that wouldn't stop ringing in my head. Carol, a 68-year-old grandmother, knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act. I had to get help to protect my little granddaughter. But the house, which was once my home, now felt like a prison full of shadows. I decided to talk to my neighbors, the familiar faces I chatted with every day, hoping they would understand and support me. I left the house with a heavy heart, clinging to a sliver of hope. The first person I went to was Rose, my neighbor across the street, who I'd always considered a friend. She was sitting on her porch, knitting in the shade of an olive tree. I took a deep breath, walked over, and said cautiously, "Rose, I need to talk to you. Have you ever noticed anything strange between Rick and my granddaughter, Lucy?" I hoped she would sense the seriousness in my voice, that she would listen. But Rose looked up, hesitated for a moment, and then let out a nervous little laugh that chilled me to the bone. "Rick, for heaven's sake, Carol, the man's a saint. Just last week he climbed up on my roof to fix a light for me. How can you spread rumors about such a good person?" Rose's words were like a punch to the gut. I tried to stay calm and explained, "Rose, I'm not making anything up. I've seen things that worry me, and even Lucy's teacher has noticed that the girl is scared." but she just shook her head with a look of pity. Carol, don't overthink things. Rick is a decent man. The whole neighborhood knows it. Maybe at your age, you just worry too much. I froze, feeling the ground sink beneath my feet. Rose, with whom I had shared so many stories, was now looking at me like I was a crazy old woman just looking for trouble. I didn't give up. I kept walking and knocked on the door of Lou's house, the owner of the corner store, who always greeted me with a friendly smile in the mornings. I told him the story, trying to keep my voice steady. Lou, have you seen Rick do anything strange with Lucy? The girl is very frightened. Lou stopped counting his money, looked at me suspiciously, and then said, Young Rick, he comes in every day to buy things for Amy, and he even buys candy for the neighborhood kids. Such a family man, what could you possibly criticize, Carol? I wanted to say more, to tell him about the video, about Lucy's drawings, but Lou's look told me not to bother him anymore. I turned away in silence, my soul hanging by a thread. I continued down the street, knocking on door after door, from Clara's house to young Mike's. But every door that opened only brought more disappointment. Everyone had a good story about Rick. One said he helped them move, another that he fixed a pipe for them without charging. Teresa, the oldest woman in the neighborhood, even told me to my face, Rick treats me like I'm his own mother. Carol, you have such a good son-in-law and you don't appreciate him. Stop trying to ruin your daughter's happiness. Her words were like a razor, cutting deep into my heart. I was stunned, unable to believe that the whole neighborhood, the people I considered my friends, had turned their backs on me for someone like Rick. He had silently built a perfect facade, making everyone believe he was an exemplary man and that I was just a paranoid old woman. I walked back home, dragging my feet as if I were in shackles. Lucy was still at Rose's house, where I had left her to be safe. I didn't want her to face Rick. I didn't want her to suffer another second of fear. Sitting in the cold kitchen, I gathered the courage to try to convince Amy one last time. When Amy came out of her room with a cup of coffee in her hand, I called out, Amy, we need to talk. She looked at me, her eyes cold, but she sat down. I took a deep breath and said with a trembling voice, Honey, I have proof. I saw Rick doing something wrong with Lucy on the camera, and the psychologist says the girl has trauma. Please, think about Lucy. Amy slammed her cup on the table, her voice as sharp as a knife. That's enough, Mom. You're the one destroying this family. Rick is the one who picked me up after so many years of living in hell. And that girl, she paused, her eyes blazing with rage. That girl is just a burden. Don't believe her lies. I stood there, petrified, as Lucy peeked out from behind me, her small, trembling hands clutching my apron. Amy's words were like daggers in my heart, hurting so much it was hard to breathe. My daughter, the one I raised, was now calling her own child a burden and defending a man I knew was a demon. I stood up, squeezing Lucy's hand, and looked Amy straight in the eye. My voice shook, but it was filled with determination. If you no longer believe me or your own daughter, then from this day on, Lucy and I are no longer your family. Amy let out a bitter laugh, her gaze icy. Fine, I don't need anyone. Rick is all I need. She turned to hug Rick, who had just walked into the room. His eyes passed over me with a hidden smirk, as if he knew he had won. I pulled Lucy out of the room, closing the door behind me. The sound of the door closing was like a final declaration, separating me and my granddaughter from the house that was once our home. Inside me, a flame of determination ignited. I knew I was losing Amy, that I was losing the neighborhood that was my community, but I didn't care. For Lucy, I was willing to change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a burning determination in my heart. After months of living with fear and helplessness, I knew I couldn't let Lucy suffer for another second. My granddaughter's pleas, her disturbing drawings, and Dr. Stevens' diagnosis were like a fire pushing me to act. I couldn't let Rick keep hiding the demon inside him behind that mask of perfection. Today, I would bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. I sat at the kitchen table. The morning light streamed through the window, but it couldn't warm the chill I felt in my soul. In front of me was my old cell phone with the camera footage. the undeniable proof of Rick's horrible acts. I carefully saved a copy of the video, noted the exact date, and took out Lucy's drawings that Miss Davis had given me. Those strokes of black, red, and dark blue crayon that formed the image of the monster with glowing eyes and the little girl huddled in a corner broke my heart every time I looked at them. I also printed the photos of the faint bruises on Lucy's wrist, the marks I discovered by accident when she quickly pulled down her sleeve. I organized every piece of evidence carefully in a folder, my hands shaking but my heart firm. I called Lucy, who was staying with Rose, and told her, "Sweetie, you're coming with me today. We're going to do something very important." She looked up, still with a bit of fear in her eyes, but she nodded, clutching her teddy bear. I took her to the police station, walking with heavy but steady steps. Inside, a voice kept repeating, "Carol, for Lucy, you have to do this." When we went inside, a young police officer named Miller helped us. He had a serious face but a kind look in his eyes. I placed the folder on his desk and said with a choked voice, "Officer, I'm here to report something very serious. It's about my granddaughter, Lucy." Officer Miller listened attentively as I told him everything, from the camera video and Lucy's drawings to Dr. Stevens' diagnosis of her psychological state. I tried to keep my voice steady, but every time I mentioned Rick, I couldn't stop the tears from rolling down my cheeks. "I tried to tell my daughter, but she doesn't believe me," I said, a lump in my throat. "I can't let my granddaughter keep living with this fear." Miller nodded, reviewed every page in the folder, and then played the video on his computer. When the image of Rick pulling Lucy towards him appeared, his expression hardened. He said in a grave voice, "Don't you worry, Carol. This evidence is very clear. We're going to open an investigation immediately." That afternoon, I stood across the street, holding Lucy as I watched a patrol car park in front of the house. My heart was pounding, a mix of nerves and relief. Rick was sitting on the porch with a beer in his hand, as calm as ever. But when he saw the police officers get out, his face turned pale, and the beer can slipped from his hand, smashing on the ground. Amy ran out of the house frantic and stood in front of the door with her arms outstretched. "You're making a mistake. My husband didn't do anything. You can't come in." Her voice sounded broken, full of anguish, but I stood still, holding Lucy close so she wouldn't have to see the mess. An officer read the arrest warrant in a firm voice. "Rick Morales, you are under arrest on suspicion of corruption of a minor." Rick stammered that he was innocent, his voice trembling. "I didn't do anything. It's all a lie from that old woman. You have no proof." But when the handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists, all he could do was hang his head, his eyes filled with panic. Amy was crying, clinging to an officer's arm. "Please don't take him. He's innocent. My mom made it all up." I heard those words and felt my heart break. My daughter, the one I raised, was now screaming to defend the man who had hurt her own child. The officer looked at Amy and said coldly, "You'll also need to come with us to the station for the investigation, on suspicion of being an accessory." Amy froze, shaking her head over and over, but in the end, they took her away in the patrol car too. Lucy snuggled against me and whispered, "Grandma, is my mom going to be okay?" I held her tighter, trying to make my voice sound calm. "Your mom will be okay, sweetie. But right now my job is to protect you first." Inside me, pain mixed with relief. I had done what I had to do, even if it meant losing Amy. The neighbors started gathering around the house, whispering. Some covered their mouths in shock, others whispered in shame. Teresa, the one who had criticized me, stood on the corner mumbling, "It can't be young Rick." Some of them started looking at me with guilty eyes. Lou, from the corner store, came over and said with a shaky voice, "Carol, we were wrong. I never imagined." I just nodded, not responding. I didn't blame them, but the pain in my heart was too great to forgive so soon. The news spread like wildfire. A few days later, the local papers published the story. "Man with good neighbor facade arrested for corruption of a minor." Those words, though they confirmed the truth, hurt me. I didn't want the whole world to know about my family's pain, but I knew it was the price to pay to protect Lucy. I sat on the couch, holding her as she snuggled against me. There was still fear in Lucy's eyes, but I saw a small glimmer, a relief I hadn't seen in a long time. "Grandma, he's not coming back, right?" she asked in her little voice. I stroked her hair and whispered, "That's right, sweetie. He's not going to hurt you anymore." I knew this battle was just beginning. Ahead were long days of trials, of police questions, and perhaps a permanent rift with Amy. But looking into Lucy's eyes, I felt that every sacrifice was worth it. I had brought the monster into the light, and even though my heart was shattered, I knew I had done the right thing. I held her tighter, promising myself I would spend the rest of my life protecting her, giving her the safe and happy life she deserved. The morning of the trial, I woke up with a mix of relief and heaviness. Rick's case had been fast-tracked due to its severity and public interest. I stood in front of the mirror, straightened my worn-out blue sweater, trying to look strong. But inside, I was a mess of pain, anger, and a little bit of hope for justice. I looked at my own eyes in the mirror. The deep wrinkles seemed to tell the story of these months of suffering. Today, I would take Lucy to the courthouse, to face the truth, to protect her, and to close this painful chapter of our lives. I went to Rose's house to pick up Lucy. She was sitting in a corner of the living room, hugging her teddy bear, her gaze lost. I knelt down, stroked her hair, and said softly, "Sweetie, we're going to the courthouse today. You don't have to say anything, just being by my side is enough." Lucy nodded, her little hand clinging to mine as if I were her only anchor in this storm. We walked outside. The morning sun lit up Lucy's pale face, but couldn't dispel the fear still visible in her eyes. When we arrived at the courthouse, the scene at the entrance left me frozen. Reporters and people from the neighborhood surrounded the entrance, holding signs that read, "Justice for Lucy," and "The demon must pay." The shouts of outrage echoed down the street like a chorus of fury. I held Lucy's hand tighter, pulling her close, trying to shield her from the chaos. "Grandma, there are so many people," she whispered, her voice trembling. I bent down and smiled to reassure her. "Don't be scared, sweetie. They're here to support us." But inside, I was shaking too. Not because of the crowd, but for the moment I would have to face Rick and Amy in the courtroom. Inside the courtroom, the air was as heavy as lead. They brought Rick in, dressed in a gray prison uniform, his head bowed, not daring to look at anyone. He was no longer the self-assured man with a fake smile that I knew. Now he looked small, weak, like someone whose mask had been ripped away. Amy entered behind him, her face gaunt, dark circles under her eyes which were red from crying. I looked at my daughter and felt my heart break. Amy, the child I raised, was now here, accused of being an accomplice to the man who hurt her own daughter. I wanted to run and hug her, to tell her I still loved her, but the pain she had caused Lucy kept me from moving. I squeezed Lucy's hand, feeling it tremble in mine, but her eyes, though frightened, looked straight ahead with a firmness, as if she were ready to face her nightmare. The judge, a woman with a stern face, banged her gavel to begin the session. The prosecutor started presenting the case, his voice clear and firm. "We have compelling evidence of the crime of corruption of a minor by the defendant, Rick Morales, as well as the complicity of Miss Amy Lopez in concealing the crime." The entire room held its breath as the camera footage was projected onto a large screen. The image of Rick holding Lucy, the look of panic on the little girl's face, and his violent gesture appeared with brutal clarity. Murmurs of anger began to ripple through the room, a wave of indignation. Dr. Stevens' report was read aloud, the prosecutor's voice echoing, "The minor, Lucy Lopez, shows signs of severe psychological trauma resulting from intimidation and mental terrorism suffered over a prolonged period." I felt Lucy's hand tighten, as if every word reopened her wounds. I leaned in and whispered, "I'm here, sweetie. It's all going to be okay." But I was shaking myself, unsure if I had the strength to guide her through this. Rick's lawyer stood up, trying to argue. "This video could have been edited. There is no direct proof that my client committed an illicit act." But the prosecutor immediately refuted him, presenting a forensic report that confirmed the video's integrity. "This is irrefutable proof," he said, his voice icy. "The defendant took advantage of the family's trust to commit his depraved acts, and Ms. Amy Lopez, knowing this, chose to cover for him instead of protecting her daughter." It was Amy's turn to be questioned. She stood up, her hands trembling, but still stubbornly defending him. "My husband is innocent. My daughter is lying. She just wants attention." Amy's voice broke, as if she didn't even believe what she was saying. The prosecutor looked her straight in the eye and said sternly, "Ms. Lopez, you knew about Rick Morales' behavior, but you ignored it and even covered up his crime. You failed in your role as a mother." Those words were like a hammer blow that made Amy collapse into her chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. But no one in the room felt sorry for her anymore. I looked at my daughter, my heart shattered. I wanted to believe that Amy was just blinded, that she hadn't meant to hurt Lucy on purpose, but what she did had crossed every line of forgiveness. Finally, the judge banged her gavel, her voice ringing out clearly. "Having considered all the evidence, the court finds Rick Morales guilty of the crime of corruption of a minor and sentences him to 12 years in prison. Amy Lopez, for the crime of complicity and concealment, is sentenced to 3 years in prison, and her parental rights are permanently terminated." The sound of the gavel was like a final cut, ending the nightmare Lucy had lived through. They took Rick away, his head down, while Amy screamed, "No, please! I didn't mean to," but her cries were drowned out by the shouts of the crowd outside. When the police escorted them from the courthouse, the people waiting outside unleashed their fury with rotten eggs and curses. "Demon! Traitor!" The shout sounded like a second sentencing. I hugged Lucy tightly, shielding her from the chaotic scene, and whispered in her ear, "It's over, sweetie. It's all over. Justice is done." Lucy buried her face in my chest. She didn't say anything, but I felt her little body slowly relax, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. After the trial, I decided to quit the cleaning job I'd had for decades. The days spent in front of a sink or cleaning other people's floors no longer made sense compared to dedicating all my time to caring for Lucy, my little granddaughter. I wanted to use the years I had left to give her a safe life, a real home. The old house, filled with painful memories, now needed to be filled with love and peaceful moments. The first few days after the trial, Lucy was still haunted by nightmares. I would often wake up in the middle of the night to her muffled screams, sounds that broke my soul. I would run to her room, hold her, and whisper, "It's okay, sweetie. Grandma's here." Lucy would snuggle into my chest, her little body trembling, but gradually, those screams became less frequent. Instead, I started to hear the calm, steady breathing of my granddaughter as she slept. Every night I would sit by her bed, watching her sleep, my heart aching for what had happened but relieved to know the nightmare was over. One morning, I decided to do something to bring joy back to Lucy. I went to the store and bought her a new box of crayons, the kind with all the bright colors she used to love. When I gave her the box, Lucy's eyes lit up, even if just for a moment. "Grandma, they're so pretty!" she exclaimed in her clear little voice. I smiled, sat beside her, and watched her carefully open the box and start to draw. Her first strokes were still timid, but then on the blank page, images began to appear. A bright yellow sun, flowers of many colors, and dolls that were always smiling. There were no more red-eyed monsters or dark shadows. I looked at the drawing and tears streamed down my face without me even realizing it. Lucy was slowly healing, and I knew that although the road would be long, she was going to be okay. The neighbors, the ones who had turned their backs on me, started to come around. One afternoon, Rose knocked on the door, holding a basket of freshly baked cookies that smelled deliciously of butter. She stood there, her eyes full of guilt, and said with a trembling voice, "Carol, we were so blind. I never imagined Rick was that kind of person. Please forgive me for what I said to you." I looked at her, still with a bit of pain, but I nodded and gave her a faint smile. "Thank you, Rose. I just wanted Lucy to be safe." Rose took my hand, her eyes red. "You are the strongest woman I know, Carol. If you need anything at all, just let me know." Those words, though they came late, warmed my heart a little. The day Lucy went back to school, I walked her there, holding her hand on our usual path. I was nervous, afraid she would retreat into herself again, that she would be scared to leave my side. But as soon as we reached the school gate, her friend Sophie and a group of kids ran toward her, surrounding her with smiles. "Lucy, are you okay? We missed you so much," Sophie shouted, pulling her by the hand. A boy in the group with curly hair raised his fist in the air and yelled, "From now on, we're Lucy's bodyguards. No monster is getting near her." All the kids laughed and pulled Lucy into the schoolyard, as if nothing had ever happened. I watched them from a distance, and without realizing it, I started to laugh. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but this time, they were tears of happiness. Lucy looked back at me and gave me a radiant, crystal-clear smile, one I hadn't seen in a very long time. In the following days, I watched as Lucy reclaimed her innocence. One day after school, I saw her surrounded by her friends, walking and singing a children's song. Lucy was in the middle, her cheeks rosy and a smile on her face. A boy in the group, holding a branch like a sword, shouted, "We're going to protect Lucy forever." Lucy let out a laugh, turned to look at me, and her eyes sparkled with joy. I stood there, my heart warm. The wounds in her soul might not have fully healed, but that smile was proof that she was emerging from the darkness. One evening, I took Lucy for a walk along our usual path. The setting sun painted everything in gold, covering our shadows with a warm light. I squeezed her hand gently and said softly, "Let's go home, sweetie." Lucy looked up, nodded, and her clear eyes shone in the sunlight. "Okay, Grandma," she replied, her voice soft but full of life. We walked our shadows, one large and one small, stretching out on the path, peaceful and steady. I knew the painful chapter had closed, making way for a new dawn, one filled with love and hope. After everything we went through, I realized one thing. Silence can kill trust and happiness, but the courage to speak the truth, even if it means facing loss, is what truly saves the ones we love. The lesson I want to share with everyone is, never ignore the signs, especially when it comes to children. Listen with your heart, trust your instincts, and act in time. Because there are wounds that, if not protected and healed from the beginning, can haunt a person for a lifetime. I lost a lot, but I know I did the right thing for the safety and future of my granddaughter. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We are not telling this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose silence to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your own voice? I would love to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. May God bless you always, and I'm sure that courage will lead us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'll leave you with 2 of the channel's most loved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.